Welcome to the In Search of More podcast. I am your host, Ellie Nash. Join me weekly on my quest for more from myself and more from this world. We'll see you on the other side. All right, welcome, Rabbi Baruch Gartner.
Very nice to be here.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you. So I feel very geared up and excited, not only because you're here, but also because I haven't done this in a while. I don't remember the last one I recorded.
Really?
It's been a little bit, so you have
I'm
me.
watching.
So we've recorded a bunch. There were times where I was recording sometimes 4 or 5 in a day, so we have a good backlog of episodes. And now when the right opportunity comes, we bring someone in, and I come in energized and excited. I missed this space, so I'm glad. I'm gearing up for something. I have a lot of energy for you. So.
I hope it's good.
Okay, so bring us into your story a little bit. You live in Israel today. You have a beautiful American accent. So.
Yeah. When I was in high school, I became very interested in spirituality. And
what type of high school were you in?
Regular public
Jewish public school.
And
in Baltimore.
I think that being around a lot of secular Jews helped me decide that Judaism was not the right way to go. And spirituality was the right way to go. And so I had a lot of searching in the spiritual world. And right now, I just recently spoke 2 of my new students, clients that I met through Gedalia Fenster, have a ketamine clinic. And I've been talking about that because today there are many, many people who are stuck. They're just literally suffering. I'm specifically now intimately involved with a person who's really, really suffering to the point where he just doesn't want to keep living.
Right.
And it was beautiful because we were in our silence, and sometimes that's the only thing you can do with a person like that. We together, he said, you can't relate to what's going on to me. I go to this exercise person, he tells me through exercise I'll get better. And I go to ayahuasca person, he says through ayahuasca I'll get better. He goes, but I'm suffering. Everybody's telling me that I'm going to get better. Nobody can really relate to what's going on to me. And we were talking, and he said, if I get through this, I'm going to save thousands of people from killing themselves. So I've experienced this myself. I see this is going on in the world, and I've been talking about this. It's not the only thing that I do, but I think right now a lot of people are asking the question, is it permissible? Should I do this? So many people are asking me because I'm like a little coach, and people ask me about this.
This meaning?
Should I do psychedelics? Should I do ketamine?
Right.
Should I do ayahuasca? Should I do mushrooms?
Yeah.
And I'm not here to advocate for sure. That's not what I do. In fact, everyone knows that there's dangers. There's also not just dangers. There's a question, do you really need it? Because I was just with Gedalia Fenster this morning, and our whole podcast was about simplicity and recognizing that inside of our tradition is a very deep tradition, a very deep spiritual practice that most people don't even know exist. And so that's really where my focus is. Even when I'm working together with the people who are running this beautiful clinic, what I spoke about was now that you have this thing that's a door and people are going through the door, make for them a room. Make for them a room of perception. It says in Shir Hashirim, the king is bound up in his chambers. It says in Tikkun Zohar, the chambers of the mind. How are we going to get a vision of God on a constant basis, not just a fleeting moment? So all of the old-time gurus in the psychedelic world said clearly that it was just a door. Beyond the door, there has to be a spiritual practice. And Judaism is a real spiritual practice. That's what I do. That's what I teach. And that's what I hope people, even if they do need a jump start, they will eventually recognize that there's nothing wrong with Judaism. It's healthy, it's well, it's relevant today.
Okay, so let's slow down just a little bit because we did a lot in that one segment. In that one
Well, we don't want people to turn off.
We might want them to turn off. Depends on what we say. They may want to turn off. So earlier, when you were talking about the, you said certain secular people or being around a lot of secular Jews turned you off to Judaism and turned you towards spirituality. So help me understand what that means. What does spirituality mean?
Well, first, let me be clear about this. It's well known to the world that not a large majority of Jewish people are not practicing Judaism. They're considered Jewish. They appear to be Jewish. They support Israel, but they're very not traditionally Jewish. And they seem to be very good at making money and having a good time. And I got privy to see the shallowness of their lives. And that was it was almost as important as seeing the heavens open up in my other modes. So, you know what I'm saying? Is it's almost as important to see the emptiness of physical existence as it is to be privy to see spirituality. So that was a really important thing.
Yes,
not
we never know what's behind
everybody has that gift of being around quote unquote very, very successful people who are very, very unhappy.
Right.
It's important.
Yeah, when I depends on which context, but sometimes when I talk about my story and explain where I had a certain breaking point that I knew that I needed something different, it came early for me, my early 20s, but one of it was hitting certain financial goals and being utterly disappointed at how meaningless they were.
I literally jumped over all of that. I knew that money would not make me happy. And I literally jumped over that whole thing and went straight into spirituality.
So what does spirituality mean? What do you mean by that? Is that Buddhism? What are you referring to?
I, from a very early age, knew that there was a higher reality, and I've been on that inner search from age 20.
And what did that look like at first? At first, it was a rejecting of sorts of Judaism?
Well,
or what you thought Judaism was?
No, there's no need to reject because I wasn't, it wasn't my lifestyle. I was into meditation and even the recreational things that young people do. For me, it was spiritual. Everything was spiritual. It was in search.
Recreational,
of
you mean psychedelics or things like that? Got it. Okay.
So it was all in search of a meaning, search of inner truth. And I don't know if it's too early to go into, but at the Malava Malka that I spoke at, the first thing that I said was a true story that reads like a parable that Rabbi Nachman said, and also the first thing that Rav Simcha Bunim would tell his students is this true story about Rav Isaac of Krakow. This very poor man, and he had a dream, and it kept coming back, that in Prague, under a bridge, is a treasure. And he had never been to Prague, and he couldn't believe, why is this dream coming back to him, until finally he had to travel to Prague. And sure enough, even though he had never been to Prague in his life, he saw that bridge, and he knew that underneath that bridge is a treasure. But there was a problem. There were guards all around, soldiers. So he came back every day until finally they recognized him. He said, "What are you doing here?" So he told the truth. He says, "There's a treasure under here. Let's split it." So the guard laughed. He says, you Jews are all dreamers. And I also had a dream last night that in this little town called Krakow, in this little shack in the kitchen underneath the stove is a treasure. He recognized by the description that that's his house. He recognized that the whole thing was to get him to understand that it's by him. He literally went home, dug, found the treasure, and built the shul that people visit till today. What's the moral of the story? Is that stop looking for God in South America. Stop running, looking everywhere in the world by this person, that person. The real tzaddik will tell you that it's inside. It's really inside of you. Your soul is a portion of God. It's a search. There's a lot to talk about because even though it's simple to say, it does need a map, it does need understanding, and that's what I do.
But how important is that search in the story? Meaning, how important is it to know that there's nothing there before we can look earnestly under our own stove?
It's pretty important because there, today especially, there's so much out there, and it's in front of you. It's all on your phone. You know that there's this, that, and other thing. And you know that there are people who will testify that it's great. It helped me. So it's almost as if people are distracted all the time by things other than their real treasure. So, and especially today, that unfortunately we live in an age where you just get in a car, step on the gas, and go 100 miles an hour. People don't want to work hard. It's hard to work hard. So when you get out of the mode of recognizing the truth of no pain, no gain, so you're looking for an easy fix. You're looking for easy spirituality. You just want to go to a kumsitz and feel good. It's great. A kumsitz is good, but it's not necessarily the inner work that we all need to do.
Okay, I want to get more into your stories before we go into some of these details, just as a way to understand who is it who's saying these things.
I knew you would do that.
So you mentioned early 20s, you get into spirituality, whatever that means, meditation, just the search is on. You know there's more. It's not a search for materialism. It's a search for spirituality, for deeper meaning. Where does some of that take you, and how does it eventually land in Jerusalem?
I have to inject here something really important. Because my brother always tells me, my younger brother, who followed in my footsteps and eventually did come to visit me in Eretz Israel and did become religious, my dear brother tells me that on a particular night when my parents were trying to figure out what to do with their spiritual son, so my brother was in his room and he pulled out his siddur and his talis and his tefillin, and he was praying for me, even though we were very far away from prayer. But so I really got lucky in that there was a family influence that said, "Hey, you want to be spiritual? Go to Israel." That's what I did.
What were they concerned about when he was praying for you? What was he worried about?
The honest truth is that inside my gut, I knew that Eastern religion was not my DNA, truthfully. And I said to you privately that one of my teachers was a Jewish person named Richard Alpert, who became Ram Das, which is crazy because Ram Das means Ram, which is elevated, and Das is what my podcasts are all about, Das. And he was one of my teachers. His book, Be Here Now, was a bestseller. And eventually, he came around to check out Judaism, and he sat in on a class of mine. It was really cool to have one of my teachers sit in front of me. He was obviously older, and he didn't really get into it, but he did check out his Judaism, because I think that even then his guru told him that it's important to recognize your Judaism. We are Jewish, and Judaism resonates for those that truly seek it. If you're allergic to it and you have trauma from it, I can understand why you would shy away from it. I didn't have that. So, and I was introduced to really cool Jews, people who talked my language, people who knew about Jewish meditation, people who understood that there was something called the Kabbalah and Chassidut, that there was a mystical side of Judaism. And
So when your brother was praying, he was praying that you wouldn't end up kind of lost in the Eastern
yes,
religions.
yes.
You weren't worried about that, but him, your
No,
parents
that's
were.
what I said, is that deep inside I also knew that there was a foreignness to...
But you were flirting with it. You were dancing with it. There was teachers.
Yeah,
that you
because
learned from.
it was definitely better than the alternative of my life as a secular
Right.
Jew.
Looking for the word, as sanitized Judaism.
Well, for me, it wasn't even. I don't know. Don't forget, there's. I don't know what's worse. I don't know what's worse, secular Judaism or religious Judaism that's sanitized. I'm not sure which one's. I know that the people who are doing Judaism are fulfilling their mitzvahs, but sometimes you could be fooled more by thinking that you're going somewhere.
Right. I learned something last night. It was my first time learning it, so I don't usually like to repeat it that quickly, but now that you're mentioning it, it was a teaching of the Rebbe where he spoke about kind of someone piling up mitzvahs, so to speak, but there isn't the kavanah, there isn't the richness of it. He even spoke about the possibility of someone learning for the benefit of their ego or pride or things like that. Where on the one hand, it's, I think in his words, it's feeding the klippa, right? It's feeding the dark forces. But eventually, when there's a correction and everyone is expected to do tshuva at some point, or maybe the word expected is too light. Everyone will do tshuva at some point, then all of those get,
Nice.
kind of flushed into the system as good deeds. But
Meaning they're elevated.
yes.
Rabbi Nachman has a similar teaching that's based on a story about the Baal Shem Tov. He came to a shul, and he stood at the door, and he didn't go in. And they said, Rebbe, what's wrong? He says, this shul is full of prayers. They never went up.
Oh, gotcha.
So Rabbi Nachman explains that often people could pray without intention, and those words are like blind people.
Right, they're angels
But
without wings.
If a person eventually wakes up and in the middle of his davening, he starts to say words with fervor and with intention, so that one seeing person can lead all of those blind people. And that's what happens when a person says words with intention, so he can elevate all of the prayers that weren't said with
Right.
kavanah.
Yeah. It was actually, the sikha is the teaching is on Parshas Kairach, which is this week, and he was connecting Parshas Shlach, the mistake of the spies, was thinking that, hey, let's live in the desert, let's live lives of spirituality, which seems very similar to the Buddhist
Right.
angle. Let's detach as much as possible, unattached beings. And then the mistake of Kairach was thinking that kind of everyone is equal. What do we need a Maisha for? Everyone's equal. We're all doing good deeds. So if everyone's doing good deeds, we can all do good deeds in the same way. Everyone put on film this morning, so what do we need What do we need a leader that's exalted so much above us? Which is that mistake of not recognizing that the intent and the action needs to
100%.
match. Got it. So you first went you grew up without any of it, not the action, not the spirituality. Eventually, you find the your first error was the error of the spies, right? So to speak. You go looking for spirituality. Your family's worried about you, but there was a disconnect. You knew right away it wasn't for you. How did you eventually get to Jerusalem?
So I traveled to Israel with people who were attuned to spirituality and at the same time religious, very religious. And I was introduced to Jerusalem. And because we were into meditation, we davened longer, and we by nature gravitated to Breslov. Then there was just one Breslov shul, really, Mea Sharm, and I literally got to hang out with the elders of Breslov, and they were just the most beautiful people. So it wasn't even the teachings of Rabbi Nachman. It was just, wow, look at these guys. These guys are happy. These guys are holy. And I didn't say healthy. I like the healthy thing. They were not so healthy. Some didn't have teeth, but they were really special people. And I said, look at this. They exist. There's holy Jews. There's happy Jews. Look what's going on here. They had nothing. And the truth is that this is, for me, what I love to do. I love to connect people who are not so happy, who are not so holy, and say to them, hey, you don't have to adopt their way of life. Connect with these people. Recognize that they exist. Incorporate some of these things. A lot of people, they go to Uman. They have a connection by going to Rosh Hashanah to Uman. They have a connection with these people. What I do is I create these relationships between Yisachar and Zvulun. Maybe we'll get into that, but I just think that it's really important to understand that even today, there are people who are doing simple Judaism in a way that's a religious practice that works. And how do I know it works? Mm-hmm. That's why I showed you the picture of my family. It's so important. Ask some of these people who are going to do all kinds of things in other places in order to feel spiritual, what their family looks like. Because I have friends who did alternatives, and I compare my family picture with them, and it does not look the same. And I'm not trying at all to boast, but the proof's in the pudding. Judaism has worked for thousands of years. The Jewish people are thriving, even today. And the ones that are thriving are the ones that keep the simplicity, learn Torah, pray, meditate, give charity, do mitzvahs. It's a real spiritual practice. And I think that people need to wake up and realize that their treasure is in their backyard. It's right there.
So let's break it down a little bit. When you talk about Judaism, so you grew up around many Jews, you said that wasn't it. I grew up amongst...
It wasn't Judaism.
Right. I grew up amongst many Jews, and not the same type. I grew up in Crown Heights, and I also had a feeling when I left that this wasn't it.
And I can understand why.
So maybe there was some specific trauma associated with it, and it wasn't everyone or everything, but regardless, that was my conclusion. So my question is, what is it? When you talk about people who are practicing Judaism, that's an authentic Judaism, my word, not yours, but that's an authentic Judaism. It's real. It's bringing them happiness. It's giving this sense of fulfillment, and at the same time staying true to ancient values and an ancient system.
One of my revered teachers, Reb Matul Zilber, a big tzaddik, tremendous mind, he would say in Yiddish that Avodas Hashem is nicht hacken Holz. It's not chopping wood. If you feel like your Judaism is chopping wood, then you're doing the wrong thing. I, thank God, have been lucky enough to be around and even mishamish, I don't know how to say the word in English, to drive, to make teas for, to bring books for, to serve real tzaddikim that they are literally in the world of Tanuk. They're in the world of delight. Tzimar Zilberberg. For him, Avodas Hashem is the greatest delight in the world. So when you're around these people, and especially my family, extended family, the Kol HaChatzos, us getting up at night is the greatest joy. I say jokingly, all those that lament reap the joy. Many people think that it's a morbid thing to mourn over the destruction of a building that you didn't even see thousands of years ago. And with the promise that in the world to come, they're going to give you some kind of future happiness. Guess what?
But in the meantime, it's miserable.
It's not. Rabbi Nachman said it's not about the past. It's about you right now. Do the inner work tonight. And literally, in the middle, you'll feel that joy. We start off crying, and we end up dancing the same night. We even dance now before davening. It's crazy. I just want people to know, and I have this. This is my answer to the South American ayahuasca trips. Instead of going to South America, come to Yerushalayim. In one night, I will take you to a very high place without any drugs. I go with my car into the hotel. The gates open. We sit, say Tikkun Chatzos, and then we go back to Marcola and we learn. And I'm telling you, I have asked each person that comes, do you feel like you're in a different realm of existence? And they all said, yes.
So I want to get there, but I want to understand who you are first.
You're digging deeper.
Yeah, take me more through your story. So you find Israel, you find these joyous people, you find a connection to a Judaism that resonates.
Yes.
That resonates deeply.
So
what
I
happens
mentioned
next?
that in the beginning it was people, and I did meet amazing people. And people in the Breslov world, people outside of the Breslov world, my revered rabbi today, Rav Shmuel Moshe Kramer. He's the son-in-law, the oldest son-in-law of Rav Gedalia Koenig, the brother-in-law of the Koenigs and Tzfats. What a person. What a man of humility, wisdom, joy. People don't know people like that. And you meet people like that, you realize these guys are doing something. So then I started learning deeply the teachings of Rabbi Nachman, and now I know where it comes from. Rabbi Nachman's way is a way. It is somewhat different than I have great reverence for Chabad. I have great reverence for the Sfas Emes, and I see the unity in these teachings. But there's nothing like Rabbi Nachman for me, and for many people.
Yeah.
And it's a very positive. It's very deep. It makes a lot of sense. It's cohesive. It's a package. There's people like you doing it, and it works. It simply works. Now, will it work for everybody? I can guarantee you it won't. Why? Because most people don't want to work. And honestly, because I work with people, there are people who are experiencing a lot of trauma, a lot of inner pain from their childhood, and unless they get past it, they can't really do the work. The strife keeps them back from the work. Now, I actually really have to share this with you because this is a really important part of my coaching, and that is, why is there so much strife in the world? So I mentioned to you Rabbi Simcha Bunim, when people would come to him, the first thing he would do would tell this story. Well, the first thing that I do when people come to me is explain a conversation in Rabbi Nachman's wisdom, number 77, where Rabbi Nachman starts off saying the whole world is full of strife. Whether it's the wars between the nations, or the wars inside the country, or the wars even inside the house. The world is full of strife, and nobody's paying attention to the purpose of life. What's the connection between these two statements? The first two statements. It's obvious. It's obvious that when a person is experiencing strife, whether it's in the house or there's a war going on, it's very hard for a person to focus on the purpose of life, this idea of finding your inner truth. And Rabbi Nachman says an interesting thing. He says that if you look closely, the strife that's inside the house is a reflection of the strife in the world, and that there are different people in the family that are playing different roles. And there's even a person in the family who's like this person who wants peace, like a nation, let's say like Switzerland, but they, against the will, they drag them into the fray. Why Rabbi Nachman says this, I'll come back to this.
Against whose will they drag him into the fray?
The person that
Who wants
peace, they drag them in
Against
his will. Now, Rabbi Nachman says a crazy thing. He says, but you know what? Really, each and every one of us, individually, is a world. And inside of each and every person is the whole ununited nations. Inside of the individual are 70 components. They're all divergent. And if a person were to seclude himself, go out to the forest and sit alone, turn off all the strife, he wouldn't take him long before he might go crazy, because he understands that really it's all being generated from inside himself. Now, that is a crazy statement, especially from Rabbi Nachman. Why? Why is that crazy? What did Rabbi Nachman tell people to do?
Joy? He's associated with joy, dancing.
Hisbadidus.
Okay.
Seclude yourself.
Yeah.
Go out every day for an hour and speak to God, and you'll become enlightened, right? Rabbi Nachman just said in this conversation, go seclude yourself, you'll become crazy. That's a question. A question. A question's not bad. It's good.
Yeah.
I got a problem now. So I answer this question with this premise, and that's why I started this. The inner strife is really what pushes you to find your inner truth. Meaning to say, the beginning of enlightenment is to know that you're crazy. And my dear friend, Shlomo, told me that the words in Hebrew, ani, I, lo, am not, beseder, in order, is exactly the numerical value of Mashiach. So when a person starts to recognize it's not Russia and Ukraine, it's not even Hamas, it's not the presidential debate that's making me crazy. I, by nature, was born with divergent parts of my personality. In general, it's called the ego. In general, it's called the external self. This strife...
But did you say 70 parts? Was that?
Yeah. Well, look, I study
Some nations get along.
I study psychology, and there's a very famous, successful therapy called IFS, Interfamily System,
Yeah.
by Richard Schwartz. Once again, came up with this great system telling you at the bottom, at the most important piece of information is you have a soul. That's like his chap, you know? He takes it from Jung, really. And it's true. And it aligns. I love it when it aligns with the truth of the Torah. So these external parts of us, which cause a lot of the confusion and strife, are actually part of the cosmic plan. The strife of the world is actually part of God's plan to get you to be motivated to look for that part of you called the man of peace, which is very humble and willing to take a back seat and bow down to anybody who wants to take the wheel. And therefore, I like to call this process that when things get out of hand, instead of freaking out, recognize that the rectification, it's this part of the problems being the rectification, is to realize that, no, this is okay. This is supposed to happen. This is normal. If it doesn't happen to you, you should be worried. Why? Because you'll never really discover your man of peace, which is your Mashiach. So the strife is actually a blessing. And the strife forces you to find the higher self, which makes the peace among all of the parts of you. There's no bad parts. They all have to be heard. They all have to be motivated and aligned. And that's the title of my book. You want to
Living Aligned.
Living Aligned is trying to
We get a snapshot of it right here. So.
trying to put yourself in divine alignment with the cosmic forces so that you live with more vitality, you live with less strife, you live with more joy.
So you're saying this is the purpose of life?
And there's no question about it. There's no question. Because when you're doing this, you become a conduit through which good energy flows to the world. You are a walking Beis Hamikdash. You are a walking temple. And you bring about the temple. All those that have this wisdom of unity, this big picture, this broad understanding that you're not just a raven in a haven, you're not fighting the world, but you're part of a very big system. These type of people, it's as if they built the temple in their days.
So if the external world is a manifestation or expression of our internal strife, then wouldn't it stand to reason that if one person sorted it out, we'd be done?
For sure, that person's called Mashiach. Obviously, it's beautiful that you said that, because there is a teaching in Rabbi Nachman's major work, L'Kli number 61 in the second part, where he talks about this idea that God is above time. I'm not going to go into the whole thing, but I want to get to this idea that he explains that the more advanced a person gets in his consciousness, the more he rises up beyond time. Obviously, that's the concept of being present, because beyond time doesn't, what do you mean, beyond time? Meaning that the past and the future are not your place that you hang out, but you hang out in the present, and you have this consciousness that's expansive, and you're closer to the Shem. So the closer you get to that, the closer you rise up to above time. And then he explains that this is the concept of the Mashiach. And he brings from the second Psalm the verse that says, "Today I've given birth to you." Rabbi Nachman explains that Mashiach's been around for thousands of years. But there's going to come a day where the Hashem is going to, quote unquote, activate Mashiach and say, it's time. Hayom. That's what he's going to say. Hayom. Hayom ani giladaticha. Today I've given birth to you. So Rabbi Nachman says that what happened to all the suffering in those years that the Mashiach has been conscious of the fact that the Jewish people are suffering and he can't come. There's a lot of suffering. So I say, it's not for naught the Mashiach suffering. He suffered more than anybody, and therefore, when he transmutes that strife and suffering, he's going to be privy to the highest level of consciousness. So the more you suffer, if you merit to transmute that suffering, you are privy to the highest level of consciousness. Does that make sense?
Not completely. Why is the suffering so essential?
Because the Creator, who is good, who is God, who loves everyone, who wants everyone to reach his fullest potential, knows exactly how much pain and difficulties and suffering a person needs in order to activate his true essence. And it's not arbitrary.
So we're not seeking out suffering, but once it's there, to transmute it, to lean in.
Yes, and if you have a lot of it, you must know. And if you don't come to me, you must know that you're a high neshama. And Hashem has chosen you. And what's necessary is to figure out, and it's not easy, how one transmutes pain and turns it into consciousness. And this literally is exactly what Rabbi Nachman is saying. And that's why Mashiach he won't be a regular person, because he's not a regular person. He's been around for a long time, and he suffered more than us. Therefore, he will be able to transform the world. We can transform our friends and our community, but the world is for the Mashiach.
I saw recently, I don't know where I came across it, but it made an impression on me, is that the Baal Shem Tov lost both his parents. And it was specifically because of this search for parents that he eventually found, the ultimate mother and father, the ultimate father and mother.
That's a beautiful idea, and I've said it too also. That's specifically his ability to create this intimate relationship with God. His father said to him when he was a little boy, 6 years old, before he passed away, Srulik, don't fear anything except God. That gave him the capability of going out into the forest. Going out into the forest.
Scary.
Well, first of all, he was also born to parents who were older, obviously in a simpler generation, and evidently a very high neshama with less problems than most kids. Probably. It doesn't sound like he, suffered from, an angry mother, or, his father definitely was a tzaddik, definitely into hachnasas orchim.
Right.
And evidently created a very profound relationship with God at a very early age. And that's what he teaches us to do. And that's what Rabbi Nachman continues with this idea, that people don't realize that a relationship with God is the most important thing there is. And I say jokingly that when I was a scribe for many years, I didn't tell you that one. I was a scribe for many years.
You keep shifting off of your story, but I won't forget. Yeah. It's like a sofer, writing Torahs, writing mezuzahs, things like that.
And I taught many people
how to do that.
Yes. So when you watch a scribe write, it looks like magic. It's just, how do you create letters so quickly with the move of your hand? It's not a pen, it's a quill. And it's complicated. Each letter is complicated. But you practice, and you practice, and you practice until you can do it fast and good. So if you want to be a sofer, you certainly need to develop that skill. Well, talking to God is a skill that most people never develop. And it's quite important.
We had someone here, David, I forget his middle name, maybe David Yehuda Kamas or David Kamas.
Yeah,
He is?
he's a great guy.
So
We were on the plane coming here together to America.
Oh, cool. He's David Yisrael. Hey, David Yisrael Kamas. I always take his name. But he mentioned that about taking an hour every single day, that he does it and recommends to others who are really struggling.
I saw those clips.
Yeah, go in a room
good. And... I don't know, he's basically quoting Rabbi Nachman. And
he mentioned his name, yeah.
And his ideas are very similar to mine. This idea that he said it, I repeat it, I'd say it all the time, and that is, for most people, talking to Hashem, God, is strange. Because who are you talking to? Like, where is he? So Rabbi Nachman reveals that when a person is in a room or in a field talking, the Shekhinah, the divine presence, is opposite him. And when he's expressing his words, she mirrors him. When he talks about his downfalls, his difficulties, she cries back. And then it says this beautiful thing. Rabbi Nachman says, and then she consoles him. The Shekhinah consoles him and says, I will find tricks. That's the word Rabbi Nachman uses, tachbulot. I will find tricks to help you fix all of your blemishes. So what is this idea? You start to talk, and then all of a sudden you activate something called the divine presence. This divine presence, says the commentaries on Rabbi Nachman's teaching, is none other than your soul. Your soul starts to give you intimate information about your rectification. And this parallels Rabbi Nachman's first teaching, first story of the lost princess. Really, that whole story is all about talking to Hashem. Finding the lost princess is finding your inner truth. He goes, he looks, he searches, and for years, and then he sees a path from the side. This path from the side, all of the Breslev commentaries explain this is the path of talking to Hashem.
Oh, very interesting.
In the Midbar, Dibur. And in the story, countless times, the princess says to the viceroy, "Oi, I'm so sorry that you lost the chance, but now do this, now do that. Now I'll make it easier for you." Constantly Hashem is giving us information of how we can fix ourselves. But it all has to do with this idea of the inner search for the lost princess, which is your soul, which is all inside.
So I want to touch on one topic before I go back to your story. You mentioned Ani Lo Beseder being the gematria of Mashiach. If I understood correctly, what you were saying was that this realization that we are not okay inside of us, that our problems are internal, not external, that's the road to Mashiach. That's when it starts from there. Is that what you were saying?
Yes, because you stop pointing the finger at the world and recognize that the real work is inside me. I'm not here to fix other people. I can't fix other people. Countless wise men have told us we can't fix other people. In fact, you cause people to be worse off by trying to fix them. We have to fix ourselves and inspire people by fixing ourselves.
So what are we doing here? We're talking on a podcast. We're putting it out there. When you're inviting people to Chatzos Yerushalayim, aren't you offering them help in some way? Why not sit alone all day?
First of all, when I was a kid, we didn't have computers. We didn't have games other than real physical toys. One of my favorite toys was a barrel, and inside there were figurines of monkeys, brown monkeys. And they were shaped like this. And the idea was to make a chain. So the longer the chain, the better. So I say jokingly, I'm just a monkey in the chain. I am giving over what I've learned from my teachers, who have learned from Rabbi Nachman, a system to help people live better lives. That is the highest level of giving that a person can do, much more than giving money. Ashrei maskil eldal. Happy is the one that enlightens the poor. The essential poverty is a lack of knowledge. So when a person can help people with knowledge, true knowledge, that's the best way to give. So my motto is I live to give. I've lived a long life, Baruch Hashem. I've learned a lot of lessons. I keep learning, I keep learning, I keep learning, and I keep giving. And the more I give, the more I learn. That's why I'm here. I'm learning right now. Every conversation I have with every person, I'm absorbing. Wow, from this person who I mentioned before, who's not doing well, I looked at him and I said, you have changed my life. Simply changed my life. How so? He told me that I cannot understand him. And it was so deep to understand that, to hear that from a person. And I started to say to myself, stop thinking you understand people. You don't understand people. People are deep. So, like I said, every time I meet somebody, constantly learning, expanding myself, and giving that over to people.
Understood. It can just very easily become trying to fix the external world. I'm trying to understand that balance is all.
Let's turn this a little bit global.
Yeah.
My understanding of what's going on in the world is that there are people who are smart, people who are powerful, who are trying to fix the world. And they're doing it with their own smarts. And they've been around for a long time, meaning since the beginning of time. And Rabbi Nachman talks about this. When a person goes after his own understanding, he can really mess up the world. The difference here is that a person who's truly connected to Hashem recognizes that Hashem is going to fix the world. Hashem is going to fix the world through truth. He's going to reveal the truth. You can't force a human being to open up to the truth. It's a process. You can tell that all the time. I mean, you start to talk to a person, you see he's not receptive to the truth. It's not that I want to fix the person. I want to introduce the person to the light of truth of God's wisdom. That's all. You put it in front of the person. You're not trying to fix the person. You're basically putting food in front of a person.
Right. You're not grabbing them by the neck and say, eat this.
No.
Right. It's here. It's available. I'd love to share it with you, but if you're not.
Right.
Okay, so this podcast is consistent. We're not forcing anyone to listen to it.
For sure.
We're putting it out there, and
We're
hopefully
putting it out there. And, there are... You have so many beautiful people that express their different ideas. And what's amazing, and I'm learning more and more every day, is that different people need different things at different times in their lives. So for one person, right now to hear Rabbi Gartner talking about ketamine, so maybe that's going to be good for him, but in 2 years from now, he's going to be on to Tanya. I don't know.
Right. 100%.
And I actually met somebody, and it was beautiful because before I even started the class, I was shaking hands with the people that were there. And there was a person who was obviously a client of the ketamine clinic that told me in 5 minutes that he came there like really dysfunctional. He did ketamine, and now he's learning in a specific place, like beyond.
Right.
So I said, well, you just gave over my whole class.
Which was?
Meaning to say that you went through the door and you now are in the room.
Right. This individual who you mentioned earlier about who's struggling, doesn't want to live here, who said that if he gets past this, he'll be able to help thousands of people. Does he need the message of Ani Lo B'Seder, or does he not, or does he know this too well?
This particular person.
I don't mean to speak about an individual. I mean to speak about a concept. Meaning, let me ask the question differently. So it seems to be me that there are many people who know that they're not Beseder, right? There are many people who know. You talk to them and they'll tell you about all their problems in life and everything that's wrong and how messed up they are, how much anxiety and depression and confusion they have. Is Ani Lo B'Seder for them?
So it's a great question. It's a great question. Unfortunately, most people who would feel not in order doesn't stop them from fighting with the rest of the world. When a person comes to this high level of, I'm not in order, we're talking about a level where he realizes that there's no reason to fight with the world because I have what to do inside. So it's not like, we're not talking here about a person who's messed up and knows he's not Beseder. Because like I said, there's a lot of...
It's the Ani. Meaning it's the focus on Ani Lo B'Seder. I'm the problem.
Right.
That's what you're saying.
Right. And that's a very deep truth that is the beginning of enlightenment.
So it's essentially stepping out of victim consciousness.
Correct.
Got it. I sat with a gentleman here. His name is Christian de la Huerta. He's been doing breathwork therapy for like 35 years. And I asked, what is the most common problem you see? I don't know if it's the most common or the most difficult problem he sees, just across the board. And he said it has to be victim consciousness. He said it seems that everyone, I guess 100% of us need to go through that multiple times, multiple journeys through victim consciousness. Even if we step out of it tomorrow, we can blame someone for ruining our lives.
Exactly.
All
And
over.
it's obvious that the victim consciousness comes from the fact that there's so many unconscious people in the world bumping up against people, young people particularly, just literally young parents talking to their kids in a abusive way creates a victim. And that person is so, it's so easy to fall into that mentality and just carry that until something happens, like the strife gets so bad that the person wakes up.
Yeah. And the waking up point is to recognize that the struggle is within me.
Right. And that it could be that all of that unconsciousness that I got hit with is the fuel for my consciousness to be born. And without it, I would have continued life asleep and not recognized the purpose of life.
Right. Right. What's interesting is that the first time that's heard, I guess when we're living in a space of blaming everyone else for our problems, that when we hear that, it sounds like blaming ourselves for our problems. And it's hard to receive. But really, it's a very empowering.
Yes, I agree. It's almost like theologically problematic. You know, like, what did I do to deserve this? I hear it all the time. What did I do? I was a good person.
Right.
And that's where faith comes in. It's imperative that we know that God is good and his level of consciousness is beyond our capability. And therefore we have to trust that everything that happens to us is for our best, even though a truck hit you or somebody got raped. These things shouldn't happen, but they do. And God's still in charge. So what are you going to do? Either you're going to believe or not. And somebody said to me, well, what would be so bad if I didn't believe? And it's just yesterday. If people don't believe, then we're one step away from Nazism. We're one step away from eugenics. Because the minute you don't believe in divinity, then you automatically believe in the survival of the fittest. You automatically believe in the rules of nature. You automatically believe in the debunked concept of supply and demand. And we know now that there's infinite blessing. And you live in a different world. You live in a world that's cursed. You live in a world of finity. And that creates angry people, cruel people, wars. It creates people that think they're going to fix the world and they mess up the world. And that's not Torah. And that's not faith. And that's not godly. And Baruch Hashem, we have a Torah. And Baruch Hashem, we have real tzaddikim. And they know these truths. And they teach people these truths. And it's really worthwhile to consider living that way. Because you can be happy, and you can be healthy, and you can be holy.
Okay, let's go back to your story. So you move to Jerusalem. You get very enamored with the teachings of Rabbi Nachman. You go deep into that.
Well, you don't want to talk about my holy wife?
Wherever you want to go.
She's everything. She's everything. I mean, she allows, we grew together. She's my therapist. She's an amazing therapist. I live with a therapist.
Is she an actual therapist?
Yes. She works energy work. And we live a life of therapy. We live therapeutically. We are constantly transmuting our inner pain. I mean, obviously there are difficulties, but we know that that's part of the process. We're working through. We're over 60 years old. We're still working through things. We had a lot. We came with a lot, but she's a big part of the. She's a big part of the success, if we can call what we're doing successful. But I hope we can. But we got married in Israel. We met in Israel, and we moved to Tzfas.
So without going into her story, she grew up. She found.
We met.
She grew up secular and found Judaism as well.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. Okay. So you moved to Tzfat.
Yeah, and I was very close with Rav Koenig, Rav Elazar Mordechai Koenig, who's no longer alive. I was very close to him. And he's my Breslev father, meaning he taught me the foundations. We learned many times over Likutei Moharan in the olden days where he was a very approachable, small group of people. And we outgrew the Tzfat community and moved back to Jerusalem, where I met big tzaddikim, and started the yeshiva with Rav Moshe Weinberger, Derech HaMelech.
What sort of yeshiva was it?
It was the first English-speaking Hasidic yeshiva.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And it was quite special, quite special. We had a nice...
For Breslev students, Balchuvas.
Yeah, but we had different types, not just Breslev. And today they are
what ages?
fine, upstanding, important people in the world, the people that went through.
What ages with the yeshiva?
19 to 25.
Got it.
But we also had Kollel. And it was a beautiful thing. And then in 2008, there was this financial crisis. And that was the thing that wasn't supposed to be, so I could become who I'm supposed to be. Because the yeshiva had to close, so I became who I could become. If the yeshiva was still functioning, I wouldn't be who I am today.
Right. So what happened after the yeshiva closed?
So in the middle of the crisis, I started traveling to Rev Davud Abu Chatzer in Nahariya, hoping that he would perform a miracle. He said jokingly about the crisis. He said that there was a man who got stuck in a high tower in Manhattan, and he got locked in, and it was night already, and he couldn't get out. So he had a safe, and he started throwing down $5 bills, thinking that if people see money flying from the heaven, that they'll look up. And they just pocketed the money. And he says, okay, $5 bill. I'll throw down 50s, 100s. Nobody's looking up. Everybody's pocketing the money and going on. So over in the corner, there was like this planter with this tree with rocks. So he says, you know what, I'm going to try a rock. First guy, what's going on here? So Rav David said, for years, Hashem was throwing down money. Nobody's looking up. So now he's throwing rocks. So I said, Rav David, do something, So he says, don't worry. Al tidak. Chaver islay. A friend has a friend. Now in those days, all the people that I knew were telling me their friend just went bankrupt. How can I give your yeshiva? My neighbor doesn't have what to eat. My brother doesn't have what to eat. These rich people became poor. So I said to my son-in-law, would be my driver, I said, he just doesn't know what's going on. A friend has a friend. What kind of blessing is that? I closed the yeshiva. One of my closest supporters, who was like a Talmud, I said, we'll continue learning. A little support you give me. A friend has a friend, has a friend, has a friend, and it's still going on today. peace, one person brings another, and that's literally how I live. Just a chain of connections.
Monkeys on the chain, like you said.
Right. My favorite word is the word connection. In Hebrew, kesher. In Aramaic, katarna. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said, the last day of his life, all the days of my life that I was connected to this world, meaning that my soul was pushed into a body, and theoretically that creates disconnection from God. He says, but I was connected in one connection with Hashem. So the trick of life is to be a connector. We're composed of both physical body and spiritual soul. We are wired for connection. We need to work on our connections with ourselves, our souls, to be connectable with other people, create connection, create unity, and obviously you interact with physicality in a holy way and bring down the divine presence. That's
beautiful. And today, just because you shared some of this before we sat down, now it's morphed into Chatzos Yerushalayim, where every night you have a yeshiva at the crack of midnight.
You're flowing great, because the whole concept of this thing called Kol HaChatzos, people that wake up in the middle of the night, is an attempt to rebuild the temple. So what does one have to do with the other, and the word connection? Is that the temple was a place of constant connection. The tractate that describes the temple is called Masechtas Tomid. Tomid. Tomid means constant.
Right.
It's talking about the Korban Tomid, but it's really talking about the constant connection. The real title comes from that there were Kohanim, there were priests that were constantly watching the walls of Yerushalayim. This is, the commentaries explain, this was not because they were afraid of thieves. This was not because they were afraid of enemies. This was consciousness, constant consciousness. So the concept of Chatzos and having a Kol HaChatzos is that these people at that hour are creating what's called constant connection. And I won't say the whole thing, because I really, really invite people to take this tour with me. Unfortunately, I can only do it with men. And I explain the secret of this thing called constant connection.
So how would someone do it if someone wanted to participate?
Go to online to, it's right here, www.chatzos.Yerushalayim, we'll put it in the link, and make a reservation. It's very clear.
ChatzosYerushalayim.com.
We don't
Can I say
we don't ask for donations. Why? Because we know that when a person comes to this kollel, their life will be transformed, and they will want to support us, because it is truly out of this world. It's truly out of this. It's life-changing.
Okay, so now that we have this background, and you've set the stage for who you are and what you do, and some of your life story, obviously, what can fit into a portion of maybe an hour conversation so far. Now let's talk about the some of the thoughts on the treasure under the bridge. So you seem to be passionate about the fact that there are many Jews who are running to South America or to other places, looking for a treasure and ignoring the treasure that we have under our own bridge.
Correct.
At the same point in time, you reference that maybe someone needs ketamine at this point in time in their life, and maybe today we ketamine, and in 2 years they'll hear your message about Tanya or Likutei Moharan or something else. So I'm trying to understand your position so then we can have a dialogue. Is it that no one should go to South America? Is it that just in a time of need? Where's your starting point?
I said jokingly to Jay and Stephen, who run, they said, Rabbi, if you ever want free, we'll set you up. So I said, listen, I heard that this stuff was made for horses. I say, nay. I personally went through the door already. I've been there and back. Plenty of people that I talk to said, no, you have to do this, you have to do that. I personally don't want in my body a foreign substance. I believe that Moshe received the Torah with prophecy, not through plants. There are plenty of people who want to tell me that the burning bush was ayahuasca. I mean, it's a joke because he didn't eat the burning bush and he didn't get the Torah at the burning bush, but nevertheless, the people literally trying to sell you the burning bush was, mushrooms or ayahuasca. I know for a fact that there are people who are suffering. I know for a fact that it has helped many people. So therefore, I'm not with the head in the sand. I'm not here to tell people to do this, but I know for a fact it's helped people. I support these friends of mine. I believe that their business, I call Neshuma a business with a soul. And I will say
so
that
Neshama is a
out loud.
ketamine clinic in New York.
And they are dear friends.
In the early days of the podcast, we interviewed them.
Yes. Jay Godfrey and Stephen Radowitz. Dr. Stephen. And he's
Dr. Radowitz was on the podcast, yeah.
They're sincere people. They are students of mine, and they are very much aligned with the message that after ketamine comes inner work. They are both clear on that. And we are actively working to try and create a system where people can get coaching, spiritual coaching after taking ketamine.
So let's break this down a little bit, because earlier you mentioned something similar, making a distinction between trauma and healing trauma and inner work, which in my mind I maybe collapse the two and say that is inner work. If someone has traumas, if someone has challenges they've gone through in life and it's holding them back, that the inner work is to go through, is to work through that. You seem to be making a distinction. Maybe I'm reading into your exact words and parsing them too much.
I'm sorry. I also hold I don't. What's the distinction? I don't.
When you say inner work, what do you mean by that? Let me ask that way.
Well, many people believe that you need to go to a therapist, and not that I'm against therapists.
I am, but
no. The truth is, I am also, but I don't want to say that I'm against. I believe very much that the best type of therapist would be also a teacher and help people map out the human psyche so a person can understand clearly what's going on with them. I don't know if every therapist understands the human psyche, truthfully. So they wouldn't be able to, and also how to articulate what it is. What are we trying to accomplish? So therefore, what I would see important is that a person would get an education on what needs to be done before they actually even do it. And then the concept of how to transmute the pain it's an art. But honestly, instead of using a therapist, a person should get married and learn how to live together as a relationship and do what I call live therapeutically. Because the same good God who made all the problems to begin with, so he sets up people together as partners, and he will, on a daily basis, trigger you. And these triggers, I always say, what's the part of the gun that really hurts? Is it the trigger? What if you pull the trigger and there's no bullet? What if you had a bullet without gunpowder? What would happen if you pulled the trigger? Nothing. So where is really the problem? It's the gunpowder. Well, where's the gunpowder? It's not the person that triggered you. It's the gunpowder inside of you. It's the pain. It's the explosive stuff inside of you. So therefore, if we know that, so when we get triggered, either we acknowledge that we're triggered, I just got triggered, or my spouse says, I see you were triggered. Can I bring some of my consciousness over there? Can we talk about it? Can we transmute this? Can we understand, like, you can't train the world not to trigger yourself. You will be triggered on a daily basis. You just have to become aware that trigger is a sign that inside there's inner pain, there's trauma, and it needs to be transmuted. Now, that's expensive when you start to get, literally have to have a therapist for the rest of your life, because God wants you to, we're still doing inner work.
Right.
But we're not paying for it. Not because we're therapists, because we're healthy human beings who learned how to live therapeutically. So the best thing to do would be to learn how to live therapeutically. The best thing to do would be to learn how to do it, but the truth is, Rabbi Nachman's way of his Balladus is very difficult for most people. Most people have attention deficits. You have to really be focused in order to really work on yourself through the talk. And a lot of people are just, their self-talk is totally negative. You really have to train yourself. You have to know what you're doing. And honestly, it's a complicated, difficult process. It's not easy.
So I want to make sure I understand what you're saying. What you're saying is you see people running towards South America to other places. You mentioned in your own life you worked through, or you had some experiences with some of these substances, and at the time you were seeing them as spirituality, meaning an end in and of itself. And now you see others running to it in the same way.
I want to. It was not a long time before I understood. It wasn't even a year.
Right, I get that.
I read from people that was one of my points of luck is that I somehow didn't have to do everything that everybody else did in order to learn. I just observed. I observed people who are unhappy and said, I don't want to be like that. I looked at
people with
Huxley.
money. Right.
Okay. I looked at Huxley. I looked at Ram Dass, and they told me that it's not the way. They told me it's not the way.
Right.
So I didn't have to.
Right. What I was referring to was when you said earlier that you originally went there searching for spirituality. I mean, part of it was that search for spirituality, and you're seeing some of that in others as well, running to South America.
But once again, it was not like 10 years of my life.
I get it. Yeah, I get it. I'm just saying that same error, and you're seeing others making this error, but getting stuck for longer.
I do not judge people, and I don't. There's no such thing as an error. There's no such thing as an error. I just put out a podcast not long ago, hitting the mark every day. We wake up in the morning. If a person is focused, he's aiming. The problem is most people aren't aiming. They don't know what the target is. But if a person's diligent, at least he'll say, I want to do this. So he took a shot. So, okay, let's re-aim if you missed the mark. Missing the mark is the concept of chet,
yes,
sin. Okay, but it's not so bad. You missed the mark. But
so what are you hearing from me that's not landing for you the way?
Because I'm not saying that they made a mistake. It's not a mistake. It's your choice. And your choice will play out. Just like if a person, quote unquote, marries the wrong person, it'll play out. You'll learn the lesson.
And part of that playing out is you have something to say now. Maybe it'll play out by you sharing some of your own experience or some truth that you've learned along the way. Part of the way it can play out if someone's listening to this. We're not forcing anyone.
We spoke about this before the podcast, so I want to bring this in. I like to say it, and Baruch Hashem, because I've done this so many times, this quote-unquote joke, and people say they remember the joke, and it on a daily basis, so I'll tell it as a joke. Knock at the rabbi's study. Rabbi, I have problems with my wife. I have problems with my children. I have problems with my parnasa, with my livelihood. I have problems with my health. That's anything else. The rabbi looks at him and tries to console him, and he's getting nowhere. So he says, last week, the rabbi says, I was in upstate New York on rabbinic work, and I met a guy, and he told me that under him, he's got 10,000 people problem-free. Oh, wow, Rabbi, I want to become part of that community. Please take me there. He says, Woodlawn Cemetery. And he says, if I'm correct, that people who are 6 feet under are problem-free. If you got a lot of problems, that means you're really alive. And the obvious question is, why did Hashem, who's the loving God, create the world with so much strife, so much friction, so much problems? Why? The answer is that problems are opportunities. And unfortunately, what people do is they ignore opportunities, or they fight with the problem. They lock horns with it, which is totally not Eastern, and they can literally ride a problem for the rest of their life, instead of having the proper attitude, which is to recognize, just like the strife pushes you to your soul, the problems will create for you an opportunity. And in the book, I talk about this idea, how one of the biggest problems was the golden calf. It's called the Chet Hegel. The Jewish people lost it. They really lost it. But Moshe didn't lose it. What did he do? Hashem says, leave me alone. I'll wipe them out and make you into a great nation. Moshe says, I didn't even start to daven. And he said, leave me alone. In the words in Hebrew is, leave me alone. Rashi says, from here he opened up for him a petach, a gap, a space. This space is the vacuum of creation that opens us for every day a vacuum. It could be a hurt kid that needs your loving attention. It could be a poor person that needs your $10. It could be any one of a million things. I say, be the light, fill the gap. If you see an empty space where there's no God, be godly. And that gives us a chance to expand ourselves. Opportunities for what? Growth. We want to grow. How do you grow? Specifically through difficulties. No pain, no gain. Those difficulties are opportunities for you to be godly. So I'm using this formula with people, and I say, okay, you have a problem? Let's meditate. Sit with it. Ask yourself, is there something good about this problem? Is there something like that you could turn this problem into lemonade? How could you do it? What could you do with this problem? Now, I mentioned to you, this is a crazy thing. What if you use this formula on a world level? So I started to do that. I recognized that if it's true, then it works big time. Little problems are little opportunities. Big problems are big opportunities. So what happened? October 7th happened. The world's crazy happened. And I travel and I speak and I try to be relevant, so I talk about relevant things. And I try to explain to people what's going on in the world. People want to know. But I didn't do it politically. I did it according to the Torah. So I asked people, have anybody seen this picture? And everyone's seen it. Rainbow flag, held up by rainbow people, and on it, it says, please forgive me, queers for Palestine. I said, how could it be that the ultra left is supporting the ultra right? Forget who they are. It just doesn't make sense. These two sides are opposites. If one of these people would come to Gaza, they would throw him off the roof. What is the common denominator? These people are against conservative, God-fearing way of life, bringing children into the world who believe in God, have faith. Simply. And therefore, I called the class The War Against Masculinity. It's all built on Torah sources, nothing political about it. Simple. I said, God's inner desire. First thing that he said to man, fill the world. be fruitful and multiply. And Rabbi Nachman says, not just have bodies, but have children that have das, the wisdom of unity. Okay? That's what I said. Anybody wants help, I will coach them for free. I'll talk to your wife. I'll talk to you.
Anyone wants help with
the mitzvah of having more children, because I understood that it's difficult. So listen to this. This is a crazy thing. I spoke many places, but I got the same answer from a lot of people. Rabbi, do you know how much a kid costs? I'm telling you, hundreds of people. And they all said the same price. To college, $1 million. After college, another $1 million. And now, where am I going to send them to college? Harvard? Cornell? Pennsylvania? All these places are like, I wouldn't want to send my kid there. I wouldn't want to pay $1 million to send them there. So all this is happening. And on the same trip, I literally prayed to Hashem. I said, Hashem, this is a big problem. I am plugging into the subconscious of the Jewish world, and nobody wants to have kids. And that's what you want. This is a big problem. But Hashem, big problems are big opportunities. Help me understand what's going on. And Hashem literally introduced me to people. One person said to me that my business is degrees from, meaning online degrees. And he told me that he literally feels like he's saving a person from destruction. And it really made an impression on me. And then all of a sudden I came back to Israel, and one of my biggest supporters, who was busying himself with a little yeshiva, said, Rabbi, do you know anybody who does online degrees? Because I thought it would be a good idea to give the boys the option if they wanted. One thing led to another, and I realized that we could give people faster, cheaper, safer education in Israel. I went to Rabbi Grossman from Migdal Emek. He loved the idea. He told me that they wanted him to be the chief rabbi. He said, no. 99% of the people that walk through his door ask him to do this, that, or the other thing. He says, no. But to you, I say yes. Because what you're doing is what we need to do in order to bring the Geula. We're trying to bring people out of their difficult situation, a big problem, and bring them to the promised land, simply by offering them faster, cheaper, safer education. That's an example.
And how does someone access that?
We have a website. It's called illuminateddegree.com. And we are actively bringing people to Eretz Israel. And we are hopefully going to help thousands and thousands of young secular as well as religious Jewish students.
So these are for Jews in Israel, Jews in America?
Yes. No, America, the world. The Israeli society has its own education system, and it's not really going to help anybody, a BA in Israel, because they have their system.
Right. Okay, I still feel unfinished on the point we were discussing earlier, because my attempt was to repeat back what you said, but you then disagreed with me. So obviously I didn't capture what you said. I wasn't looking to, I was just trying to encapsulate what you were.
Okay, so be more articulate about the question, because I didn't.
Okay, so I want to make sure I understand your position on this concept of psychedelics, because you went into it a few times, and it's also something we speak about often.
I understand.
On this podcast. It's part of my own journey, but...
Tell us, just, for my own benefit, if you could, your own situation.
I'll give it in the shortest version I could, both from the way I grew up, a religious perspective, and then as well, kind of my healing journey. So I grew up in Crown Heights, grew up Chabad, and I finished my smicha here in Florida, and about the age of 20, 21, the same year I was finishing my smicha, I started a business. And I went fully into that life. and pretty much walked away. The way I said, the only mitzvah I was doing consciously was tzedakah. Outside of that, I was completely disconnected. Eventually, as I started, at some point in time through challenges in business, I went to therapy, and over time it became clear to me that I needed to do certain work on myself. I wanted to be in a position to have a relationship. As I started that work, I realized that some of my behaviors were more along the lines of an addiction, specifically sexual behaviors. You had mentioned that you saw my TED Talk. I spoke about pornography, but there were also other behaviors, like to say I turned pixels into people. So my behaviors also went in other directions. I felt the TED Talk, it was important to talk about pornography, so I spoke about that. I spoke about that there because it seemed to me like an area of sex addiction that had a lot of permission, while at the same time a lot of shame. There's just this weird relationship people have with.
I saw it. It was brilliant.
With porn. Thank you.
How many views did it get?
Millions. I don't know. Maybe I don't watch. I don't that often. Maybe 6 million or so. But millions of people saw it. This topic is, a lot of people finish watching porn. They say, "I got to get out of this." They go to YouTube and they find they find the video. But a lot of people are trapped in it. It's a difficult subject for many people. But through that journey of healing, I was also sexually abused as a child. So as I was working through some of that, going to therapy and other stuff, I came to the 12 steps. And the 12 steps is really where I found spirituality, this concept of a personal relationship with God. Over there they call it, they typically use the term higher power. Communicating with God, praying to God, meditating, all of this I learned
through the 12
the 12 steps. Despite the fact that I applied myself fairly rigorously in the 12 steps, hundreds of meetings and sponsors and sponsees over 6 or 7 years, I was still left with incredible amounts of anxiety. It was better. I didn't have panic attacks anymore, but once I removed the addiction, then I had all of these feelings. Shais Taub, who I quote quite often, I don't know if you know Rabbi Shais Taub, he says, when you get sober, you start feeling better. And I don't mean you start feeling better feelings, you got better at feeling. Nice. All of a sudden, all these emotions start coming up. And while I worked through many and was successful, there was this anxiety that I just couldn't overcome. Mm-hmm. At some point in time, I'd heard it many times over the years, but I heard someone that I was following through my addiction process. Today, he's persona non grata in Israel, Gabor Mate. Oh. Right, but he was
on your podcast.
He was, yes. He was an important part of my journey, and I heard him on the podcast with Tim Ferriss talking about ayahuasca. And I said, okay, I got to try. He said I
heard that too. I heard that one.
He said the number one therapy or healing he's seen for addicts was ayahuasca, which was very bizarre to me because this guy was getting people off of, heroin and cocaine and other things. I mean, someone who knows the ills of drugs. This guy would be it. And here he is recommending something else. I trusted him. I'd read a lot of his books. I adopted a lot of his approach within the 12 steps. He may say there's some parts that are not compatible. I think they are. So when he said it, I listened. Shortly after that, there were a couple other things that happened in my life, and I said, okay, I gotta move forward with this. And it didn't start with ayahuasca, but it started with other medicines, and it opened up a whole new world for me. Mm-hmm. I've worked with a number of different ones.
My question, if you don't mind interrupting, but I'm always curious, do you now still feel a need to use ayahuasca to do your spiritual practice?
No, I don't. No.
Oh, okay. So you should know that it varies because
I
know for sure that people say no every 2 months, every 3 months, and I personally, first of all, once again, I'm not judging anybody. I know for a fact that people are experiencing a lot of pain and a lot of trauma, and you can't judge them. You just cannot judge them.
Right. That hasn't been my experience with it. I've had very difficult journeys. Also, not always. Some were pleasant, but some were very difficult. So I'm not running to go back there. It's not exactly the most fun place to be. But the last time I did ayahuasca was probably about a year ago. I don't have a plan on when I'll do it next. I don't feel it imminent. In general, my approach now is I want to do everything I could to work through as much as possible outside of that space. If I feel like I'm stuck and I've beaten an issue pretty hard, then I'll go in there, but it's more reluctant because I feel like in this dimension, I can work at something at my pace. I can kind of work through it in a pace that works for me. There, it's kind of all bets are off, so if I can get the lesson in this dimension, I'm much happier. But if I'm stuck, then I'll certainly go back.
Somebody used the analogy of taking a bus or walking.
Right, so.
But you never know where that bus is going to take you. Walking, you know basically the way.
Right.
So okay. So now that we've heard your story, what would you like me to reveal to you about the way I
Right. So what's your concern? Meaning you're addressing a specific concern.
No. First of all,
And
I've been told by many people, and it's really important. I think it's important. I don't know who's listening, but unfortunately, all of these different modalities are being used illegally, not just illegally the side of law, but they're not being supervised, and some of them are very dangerous. There are many people who shouldn't be taking these drugs according to, even the shamans will tell you that if a person is schizophrenic or whatever, I'm not
Right.
An expert in this field, but it's because I've been dealing in this recently, people are telling me that there are clear guidelines for who shouldn't be doing
Yeah, there's no one who's going to be more passionate about using these things appropriately than people who've benefited from it, right?
Yes, but unfortunately, young people hear about it and don't recognize the dangers that they could have, different things, health issues or psychological issues, that they shouldn't be taking this unsupervised.
Understood.
Sure. It has to be.
Yeah.
It's important to say. It's a very important.
By all means.
And I love what you're saying is that if you can work it out through the inner work, through breath work, through meditation, through hitzbadadut, through therapy, then one should do it the long way. But once again, we're not judging.
Yeah, there were certain things, certain people say, I've heard people say about psychedelics was 1,000 hours of therapy. I said, it's not 1,000 hours of therapy because 1,000 hours wouldn't have got me there. There were certain things that I had to experience.
I like that.
I had to experience it. I had to. One person, I don't know where this concept comes from, but he told me it's like a removal of the urla. Apparently there's like a spiritual, something blocking us spiritually from seeing, from touching the world, and saying that it's not just the opposite, not touching the world. It's not as physical as we think it is. There's something else going on that's much deeper, and to begin viewing the world with that
it's interesting
sensitivity.
You use that language
I couldn't have got it.
In the Hanhagas Adam, which is very similar, Rabbi Elimelech wrote the Zettel Katan, the little piece of paper, and afterwards he wrote something called Hanhagas Adam, which is a longer version. And the first Hanhaga, how would you translate it? The Hanhagas Adam. Hanhagas Adam. The good habits of a man. So the first thing he says is that a person should learn diligently the Gemara, the Talmud, down to the halacha until he knows how to behave. And then, even though he knows from the beginning to the end exactly what he's supposed to do, often he will not be able to do that. Why? Because there are clouds that cover a person's eyes, just like you said about the Orla. And therefore, it's imperative, says Rabbi Elimelech, the first thing he says, that a person wake up before the dawn and cry, not once and not 10 times, but 1,000 times. And only then will Hashem take away the clouds that basically keep us from seeing what's blocking us. So this is a big tzaddik who 200 years ago basically understood this idea that there's orla, there's clouds covering a person's vision, and it takes work, or you have to be lucky to have this revelation. But it's true, 100% true, that a person could be oblivious to really the blocks that need to be taken away.
Right. And in terms of the concerns, part of the hope is, we have something that's been kind of underground for a long time, right? And there was a war on multi-dimensions to get these substances hidden and out of view, for whether it was through laws or through other kind of pressure.
Why do you think that was?
On a spiritual level?
No. Why?
Well,
Okay, you can say both. Why do you think the government didn't want these things out?
I think people are easier to control without these things.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I
much
agree
easier to
with you.
control.
They're unconscious. Unconscious people are very manipulable.
Yeah. It's very difficult to... You spoke about earlier, like living in that survival pattern, or maybe you said it offline, just living from that place. This takes you out of it. Not forever necessarily,
Yes, for
but
sure.
it feels to me, since working with these, and for me it's, I'm very happy that I came to this after years of therapy and years of 12 steps, because as I entered those worlds, I had language that I was able to use down here to kind of what people call integrate, which is a fairly broad word. But I went back to those things and saying, okay, what are some of the same ways that I was trying to get through stuff? But now I have a new perspective. There's an open path. Prior to working with these medicines, it felt like oftentimes panic and anxiety was the only way to live in a situation. And now there's a choice. I see both of them. I can go down that path. My head can spin on, worst case scenarios for the next 10 years, or I can trust and see how over and over it works out. And there's some lesson in it for me if I'm willing to persevere through it. I don't know that. So in terms of those things, I talk about it. I know what you're saying, that, hey, it's got to be done the right way, and the legalities, and of course making sure in different places. You mentioned Nushama, who obviously works with legal substances, and they're supervised and approved and have clinicians and everything else associated with them. Recently I interviewed Natalie Ginsburg, who's part of MAPS. I don't know if you know them, but they're studying MDMA therapy, which is in phase 3 trials with the FDA. They're actually working in Israel to bring stuff to soldiers. So there are ways to do it. Some people go to South America or Costa Rica, wherever it is, in order to find ways that are more compatible with them. So of course, everyone should do it in the proper way. But I don't have tons of examples of people who've gone off the deep end with it. I just don't. I've seen people who did for a period of time. Early on, I remember meeting a guy who says he's doing mushrooms every week. And I'm like, wow, sounds scary as hell, to do this. And I questioned, maybe he's addicted. I didn't know. And then within, 6 to 8 weeks of every weekend doing it, he's more scared of it than anyone I know now. Like it's not guaranteed, but I've seen often how the medicines self-correct. And eventually someone gets loose with it, and then they get an awakening. So I don't have tons of examples. Recently, there's a famous Crown Heights website called COL Live, and someone wrote an anonymous op-ed about his son, but there was no name, so his son who went off the rails, and how dangerous all these medicines are, and addictions, they don't call it medicines, drugs, are, and how no one should do it in any circumstance. But as many people as I know who've done it, I don't have an example of this.
The truth is that you just said a father. It wasn't the son that wrote the article. Maybe the father's vantage point was terrible, but maybe from the son he became a believer of God. So I wouldn't even, that article wouldn't even sway me, because
I don't know if it's true. I don't know anything,
That's
because
what I'm
it was
saying.
anonymous.
Yeah.
It was anonymous, but it was the reason I'm even commenting on it is because many people sent it to me as if, hey, this is a reference point, but I don't have this example. I know of, oftentimes schizophrenia or things like that, those kind of struggles enter a person's life at 18, 19, 20, 21, and sometimes people mix things, and that state gets activated in that stage. I do know several people like that, but that has nothing to do with, they weren't doing psychedelics for healing. They weren't going down that path.
Yeah.
Anyone who sits with an experienced shaman or experienced practitioner of these medicines, those are the first questions they're going to ask. And to give it to an 18-year-old who's wants to do it because a couple friends said they had a good experience is not a good enough reason to.
Yeah. I have also only heard positive things, and people that I've talked to are responsible people who recognize that they're doing it for the sake of alleviating their anxiety. They're doing it with purpose, and they're finding results. And I think that they're doing the right thing. And my only thing is that I truly believe that the ancient path of Judaism should be the next step. That's all.
Yeah, and that's the one part of my story I didn't get to, is that for me it's reconnected me in a lot of ways to it. The amount of journeys I've had about Shabbos specifically, maybe this is a mitzvah that's specific.
Yeah, I literally heard the same story. A person said, last week I didn't believe in God, and now I'm in love with Shabbos. I'm literally hearing this left and right. The same thing, and specifically Shabbos.
Right.
It's beautiful. It must be something in Shabbos.
Maybe. I'm not sure, and I've heard different things for different people. They've connected in different ways to different things. But I think, like you said, it's a door that allows us to access some higher dimension of ourselves. And then afterwards, if someone chooses to walk through it, it's not a magic pill. It doesn't correct everything. People will go back to being the same jerk they were 2 weeks later.
Using the analogy that I said earlier from Rabbi Nachman, the strife is that I believe, and I think scientifically they prove, that it quiets the strife of the external self, and it lets you experience the purity of your soul. And that's the peace, the inner peace. So in a certain way, it's doing to you chemically what theoretically real meditation should do.
Right. Or sometimes, which actually is connected to what you said about Rav Nachman, is it magnifies it to such an extreme that a person can finally see it for what it really is.
The strife.
So instead of the voice kind of being out there a little bit, all of a sudden it sounds like 1,000 voices.
Right.
And
Interesting. Yeah. Okay.
You're
bringing back memories. I forgot about those bad trips.
No, and I've seen that. Sam Harris, which I'll quote, he said, "No one should recommend psychedelics who hasn't had a bad trip." Because a bad trip is the worst. Worst. Yeah, it's the worst thing.
There's no such thing as bad. Problems.
True. But the difficulty of it.
You realize that there's stuff inside of you. It's not coming from outside.
Right. That's right.
You got stuff inside of
100%. You. But the difficulty is real and the difficulty is extreme. And when someone has a blissful experience, like everyone's got to try this. But when someone has a very difficult experience or hurts themselves physically on it, or something else goes off the rails, then they're not as quick to recommend it blindly. But the fact of the matter is, the way I see it, is that another reason why it's coming back up is because if we lived in a society where we had enough time alone, we can access these states. For sure we could. There's no question. But between all the distractions, it's very difficult for most of us who've lived in this, in this century, this last 10, 20, 30 years, and grew up in it, to even access that kind of quiet. When do we have 12, 24, 36 hours of quiet?
Yeah,
Never.
Right.
Never.
For sure.
Who is it who said, most problems in the world would disappear if man can sit by himself alone in a room quietly? Right.
Beautiful.
Yeah. I don't know who it is. Can you find that quote? I'm curious who said it. What is someone? He deserves mention.
I don't know if it's apropos, but I end my book with a story that changed the life of Rabbi Elimelech Miloshinsk. His brother told it to him. He had met, is it okay if I share it?
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
Because the book is called Living Aligned, and many people don't understand the concept. What does it mean to align with Hashem? And we're talking now about all different types of people make different choices where they're going to go to find their soul. So this is a beautiful story. Well, maybe we'll end with it. That even though Reb Zusha was younger, he met the Maggid before Rabbi Elimelech. And after he met him, his brother noticed a change. And he decided he was going to follow him. And he followed him out into the forest. He saw a really strange thing. Reb Zusha standing on his head and then falling over, repeatedly standing on his head and falling over. So he said to his brother, he goes, you're okay? Like, what happened to you? So he says, let me tell you a story. And this is the story that changed his life and basically got him to go to the Maggid. So he said there was a farmer and a wife. They lived in a rural town, Ukraine. They were very successful until one day the farmer says to his wife, what's the point of all this? She says, what do you mean? He goes, we live here and what's the point? She says, what are you talking about? We have a good life. He's got the chickens and the cows and everything. He says, no, but we never see the king. Never see the king. We're so far away from the king. He goes, what are you talking about? He goes, the king lives in the royal town and he's benevolent and people love him. People see him. We're so far away. What's the purpose of this? She says, well, what do you want to do? He says, let's sell everything and move to the capital. They did that. Didn't take long for them to realize that just living in the capital, you don't see the king. So he says, Mom, I got to see the king. She goes, well, what do you want to do? He goes, we still have a little bit of money. Let's bribe somebody and I'll get a job inside the castle. That's what they did. He became the assistant to the stoker who makes the fires for the castle. And he did his job with love and devotion until finally he became the royal fireplace maker for the royal chambers. And he did his job with great devotion until finally the king's toasting his toes by the fire one day and realizes that this is a special fire. It's done with such precision, such love. He says to the CEO, I want to see what's going on here. He goes, yeah, it's a new guy. The king says, I want to meet him. He's standing face to face with the king. He says to the farmer / fireplace maker, I love your fires. So he says, it's all for the king. So the king says, maybe I could do something for you. He goes, no, all I want to do is serve the king. So the king says, but maybe there's something you want. He goes, yeah, the thing I want the most is I want to see the king every day. I want to see the king every day. The king blushes and he says, you can't see me every day, I'm the royal king. He goes, well, the king says, you know what I could do? I could make for you a hole in the mantle. And if the fire's not on and I'm sitting on the throne, you'll be able to see me. Every day before he lights the fire, he goes to see if the king's sitting there. The people with his feet up in the air. He went down the chimney with his feet in the air. You get the idea, the feet in the air. And he's looking to the people, whoa, the king. One day he sees the king having a feast with the royal family, and the prince had a little bit too much to drink. He said something he shouldn't have said. The king banishes him for a year from the castle. After a week, he's going crazy, back and forth outside the grounds of the castle. And he sees our farmer with his feet up in the air.
Who's going crazy? The prince?
The prince.
Got it.
So he sees the feet in the chimney. He goes, what's this, a spy or something? And he sees the fireplace maker. He goes, come, I know your story. Come, I want to show you something. And he stuffs the prince down with his head down and his feet up in the air. And he says, look through the hole. And he sees his father. Whoa, the king. I haven't seen the king in a week. Thank you so much. Can I come back tomorrow and see my father? So he says, no, you don't understand. I'm a peasant. This is my hole. This is the way I align to see the king. You're the prince. You're royal. You can't do this. You have a different way. Rabbi Zusha stopped the story and he said, brother, holy brother, I went to the Maggid, my Rebbe. He told me where my treasure is. He told me how to serve Hashem. He taught me my own personal way. He helped me find myself. Go to my teacher. He'll teach you how to align with the divine. Each and every one of us has an individual way to our soul. It might be through ketamine. It might not be. It might be through meditation, breath work. Could be through Hasidus.
100%.
You never know. You never know.
Yeah. I shared a sikh I learned last night, right? Earlier in the podcast.
Yeah.
That's also something that's come out from
Yes.
from medicine as well, a reconnection to learn those things. So there's no question the journey brings us back home.
That's for sure. And
some point.
it's a
But
wonderful journey, and you meet wonderful people along the ways, and you're one of them.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yes.
Likewise to you. And is that book for me?
Yes.
Oh, beautiful. Okay.
Yes, it's for you.
Thank you so much. I
And
appreciate it.
please tell people about the journey to the Jerusalem, the Midnight Experience.
They'll have heard about it here. So this is the best way for me to tell people.
I'm telling you, I really appreciate this opportunity. It's
Thank you so much.
really, really special.
Okay. Beautiful.
And I wish
Thank
you
you.
luck.
Likewise.